Yes, yes, yes. There's people. Oh, there's lots of people here. That is wonderful. Then I'm just going to start. We're going to talk about designing for AI assistants today. So thank you all for coming to this virtual talk. Happy to have you here with me. I always start with this slide. For people who have seen me before, I have a new story today, but there's a few slides that are still the same. We always like to start with this one. It's from the movie Her. And Her, it's a couple of years old, but it takes place in the near future. And it's about a guy that buys a voice assistant, an operating system, and he talks to it. And in the beginning, it's very awkward and uncomfortable, but then slowly but surely, they get familiar with each other and they become friends, and they become very good friends, and they even fall in love. And then he discovers that she's actually talking to tens of thousands of other people at the same time. And he drops out of the experience and into the uncanny valley. But I like to start with this because it shows us that people in AI, we're going to be living together, we're going to be working together. We need to learn to communicate with each other. We need to advance trust and communication between people and AI. And to do that, we need to really recognize, develop, and promote the role of the conversation designer and really educate people on designing human-centric conversations. And that's what we do as Conversation Design Institute. So we train and certify conversation designers to make AI assistants more helpful and natural at scale. And the reason we do that is that the modern business is looking to automate about 85% of their conversations on various channels, right? So it's customer service on your website, it's in your app, it's on social media, it's on the phone, everywhere where your customers are, you're looking to automate these conversations. And what that means is that in-house conversational teams are becoming the standard in the modern enterprise. So here are some of our clients. At Vodafone, you probably know them. We have about 100 conversation designers in different countries working on their chatbot, Toby. JP Morgan, it's about 20 people. There's actually multiple teams there that are really developing capabilities around conversation design. A Dutch bank, ABN AMRO, has about 30 people working on their chatbots. So just like you cannot imagine a company without engineers today, you cannot imagine a company without conversation designers 5 years from now. But what is conversation design really? All right, because we talk about chatbots and voice, but what's really the fundamental thing? And if there's one slide I'd love for you to remember from today, it's this one, because this is really what's going on, right? We have a conversation between an artificial brain and a human brain. And both brains have their own limitations and capabilities, and they both have their own triggers that they need to function, right? So to understand what people say, we use natural language understanding technology, right? And that extracts intents and entities and context and variable and gives that to the artificial brain so that it can respond. But yeah, a human, on the other hand, it needs empathy and helpfulness and encouragement sometimes, right? So when we want to have a proper conversation, we should really make sure that the language that we create caters to that human brain, right? And if we want to have proper conversations, then natural language creation needs to be equally important as natural language understanding, right? And that's why there should be a fair balance between technology, psychology, and language. All those three components are equally important when it comes to creating human-centric and pleasant and successful chatbots and voice assistants. So at Conversation Design Institute, we really recognize 3 certificates that we now have and train people for, and they all have to do with these 3 parts. So we have AI trainers, and these are really the people in the team that turn data into understanding. So they train the language models, they optimize the AI assistant, they implement the dialogues and whatever technology you're using. Then we have conversation designers that turn information or a business process into the structure of a conversation, into the flow. And then there's copywriters that really turn words into resonating dialogue, that add personality, that think about behavior design and psychology. And with those 3 capabilities embedded in your team, you're going to have a very successful AI assistant. But what does that workflow really look like? Well, there's 3 mistakes that we see companies make again and again. They start with technology, so they just start building, developing chatbots for the sake of building them. Or they focus on knowledge management, wanting to share too much information at once and not really creating room for conversations. Or they start with the business process. So they think about what they do at the company, they turn that into a flow chart, and they add some words to it, and they expect people to interact with it. But people don't talk the way your business is organized, so that often doesn't work, right? So there are 3 steps in this conversation design workflow. We start with requirements. That's really looking at what kind of technology are we using? What kind of conversations are we going to be having? Who are we going to be having them with? And who's going to be doing that on our behalf? That's our bot personality. And then we have happy conversation design and detailed conversation design. I'm going to talk you through all 3 of them. So first, we're going to talk about developing a persona for your assistant. This one's always nice. Look at friendly face. There's a nice little building with a face on it. This one's really cute. It's called pareidolia, right? And it's really the tendency to perceive a specific, often meaningful image in random or ambiguous visual patterns, right? So we often see faces in things that aren't really there, and we can't turn that off, but that's just how we're wired. And it's the same when we hear a voice. Within 1.5 seconds, we create an image of who that voice belongs to. Is it a man or a woman? Where are they from? What do they look like? How can they be of value to me? And these images just, come into existence within a second, and we recognize human traits into everything. So when people talk to your AI assistant, that's what they're going to be doing. So if you have 1 million people talking to your chatbot, 1 million people are going to create an image of who you're talking to. And you don't want that. You want to take control of that. You want to put a specific image in their brain so that you can carry it out consistently. That's why you need to create a bot persona. If you don't do that, the entire experience is going to be inconsistent, less likable, and less trustworthy. And it's going to propel you into the uncanny valley. And what it really means is that when a bot is very mechanical, we're totally okay with it. And when it's very human-like, it's also fine. But when we're not really sure if we're talking to a bot or a human, it becomes very uncanny and not a nice experience. And the reason for that is that people use a different part of the brain when they interact with someone than when they interact with something. So if your brain is confused because your tone of voice is inconsistent, they drop out to never return to your chatbot. That's why it's so important to have a good bot persona before you do any kind of writing or designing for a chatbot or voice assistant. So in our case, we have Henry, it's a butler. And when we create a bot persona, we give it a backstory. This person has worked in, studied hotel hospitality management, traveled the world, loves to cook. We give him, was born in Edinburgh, Scotland, where the conference is obviously virtually today. We write about the family life, but creating an entire personality around your AI assistant allows you to write in a consistent tone of voice. It allows you to onboard new team members to your design team as well. So personality is key before you do any design. Now I want to talk you really through, designing a conversation. We're just going to design one prompt today, one little message, and I want to show you how we do that. So we do happy conversation design, and these are the steps in our workflow. So we take our use case. In this case, we're going to be buying sneakers. Then we're going to be canvassing the bot needs and the user needs. Then we're going to do sample dialogue where we role play the interaction. We're going to create a flow chart. We're going to do Wizard of Oz testing to very quickly get feedback on our design, and then do an expert rewrite. I'm going to talk you through all the steps here today. So to really mentalize the context of a conversation, we use our conversation design canvas. But we're going to set the scene and really think about where someone is when they talk to our chatbot, what their mindset is, and what they want to achieve. Right? You can imagine having a completely different conversation when it's rush hour and you're on the train versus it's 8 o'clock, you just put the kids to bed and you're drinking a cup of tea at your kitchen table. All right, so let's see what that looks like. In our case, we're going to be buying sneakers. And we're going to be at home on a computer. We're alone, maybe a partner's in the next room. We're not really in a rush, but we're very excited to get running again. So what do I want to do? My goals, I want to buy cool sneakers, but I want to know which ones to get because I want to get fit and look cool, But I'm always worried, that I buy the sneakers and then I go running with my friends and then they have better ones and it kind of looks like I bought the wrong ones, right? So I'm really afraid to make mistakes here. So I expect this chatbot to help me select the right sneakers, right? And then from the bot's perspective, we can select sneakers and add them to the cart. We cannot recognize people or do the transaction, but we can tell you what's in stock. And we have to ask things like, what's your running goal? What's shoe size? What's the price point that we're working with? What kind of colors do you care for, etc. And we really create the context of the conversation before we do any design work. And then the next step is sample dialogue. And what we do here is we sit two people back to back from each other. And one person is playing the customer and the other person is playing the AI assistant. And they both sort of read up on the canvas that we just filled in. And then they're going to be having that conversation. They get into character. And the reason they sit back to back from each other is that we don't want them to see each other because we want to take away all nonverbal communication. And we just let them role play and have the conversation. So here someone says, I'm going to start running again. I'm actually looking for some sneakers. Well, we got a lot of those. Can you be more specific? Or no, wait, do you have a budget? It takes a while and a few tries for the person playing the assistant to figure out what kind of questions to ask and which sequence to have. So in the beginning, it's very messy, but you do a couple of iterations, and before you know it, you learn what the conversation should be to create a good chatbot. So once we've figured out what the sort of the design looks like, sort of the low fidelity design of the conversation, we can apply some conversation design fundamentals in our writing, right? So we're going to be doing that before we do any Wizard of Oz testing or rewrites, right? So some of these fundamentals are an acknowledgement, right? So somebody says, I want to buy sneakers. Okay, you want to buy sneakers. Do you know which ones? So okay is an acknowledgement. And we use this to just let the user know that we've heard you, and voice is very important. We're not communicating important information, but we just let you know that we're listening. Okay, you want to buy sneakers. That's what we call an implicit confirmation. I'm repeating what someone says to give that person confidence that whatever I'm going to say next is going to be relevant for them, because I've confirmed that I know what we're talking about. Do you know which ones? That's the prompt. Right? It's turn taking. It communicates to the other person that it's their turn to speak again. So this is a core message, and this is sort of fundamental conversation design done well. But now we're going to validate this, right? So we have our little chatbot. We test out this little message during Wizard of Oz test, and we discover that people are not ready to buy yet. They're stuck, and we're not selling sneakers. So what can we do? Well, now we're going to go to the expert rewrite, and we're going to apply behavior design principles to actually increase motivation. And we use the BJ Fogg behavioral model for the expert rewrite. Pretty much means that you can prompt desired behavior by increasing motivation and ability. And for all these elements, we have specific copywriting techniques that you can now start applying. So if you want to work on motivation, you can use social proof, anticipation. We're going to apply some choice architecture in our little message that we saw earlier. So this is our message. Okay, you want to buy sneakers. Do you know which ones? Let's apply anticipatory enthusiasm. I'm going to help you find the right sneakers. Does that sound good? That increases motivation because apparently I'm going to find the right sneakers, right? I get excited about that. Little reward at the end. Let's apply some expectation management. Okay, to help you find the right sneakers, I'm going to ask you 3 simple questions. Does that sound good? That makes it easier. Now I know what's coming, right? And it makes me excited. We can do more. Let's add some social proof. Okay, to help you find the right sneakers, I'm going to ask you 3 simple questions. For most people, this only takes a minute. Does that sound good? So now I know that other people are talking to this chatbot or voice assistant as well to buy and select sneakers, right? So now I'm excited about what's coming. I know what we're going to do in the next few minutes, and I know that more people are doing this. This is wonderful. I love talking to this assistant. But we can do more even, particularly for a chatbot. We can apply choice architecture. Okay, to help you find the right sneakers, I'm going to ask you 3 simple questions. For most people, this only takes a minute. Does that sound good? Yes, no, tell me more. right? So we're giving them 3 buttons and 2 of them have positive options, greatly increasing the odds of our users selecting a positive option. This is how choice architecture works. So this little simple sentence now becomes, a much more effective prompt because we apply behavior design during the expert rewrite. But wait, we might want to add some personality as well, right? That extra layer on top of it. So what can we do there? Okay, to find the right sneakers, I'm gonna run you through 3 simple questions. For most people, this only takes a minute. Ready, set, go, and go, right? So now we apply some personality in terms of, an assistant that's helping you buy and select sneakers. And really, if you want to design good AI assistants, these are all the things that you can apply in your designs. Once we have this expert rewrite, now we're going to go into detailed conversation design. We're going to start training our AI systems. We're going to think about when to hand it over to a live chat or to a website in our long tail design. We're going to design repair flows for when things don't go our way. We're going to implement it into our system, and then once it goes live, we're going to continue to optimize it, obviously. We don't have the time to talk you through all of those things, but you can obviously learn about those things in our academy. So it's really one big workflow that we teach and certify people on. And following all these steps is going to help you develop very successful chatbots and voice assistants, right? So use cases, they come from the business, they come from data science, they come from the analytics. You run them through happy conversation design, then you get stakeholder sign off, and then you run them through detailed conversation design. And this is an ongoing loop that successful teams use. And all these principles that we just talked about, you can learn in our online academy. So all these little titles here that you see, these are all video lectures that we teach. So some of them are on the workflow, on happy conversation design, on detailed conversation design. There's design fundamentals. There's all these videos and copywriting techniques on increasing motivation, on bot personality. We have Glassboard sessions. So there's a lot to learn in conversation design because that's only half of it. Then around AI training, we have about 60 videos on that as well. And that's just to show you that conversation design is not just an add-on for a UX designer. Just teach him how to write and he'll be fine. No, conversation design is a job and a discipline in and of itself that should be taken seriously by designers and by companies trying to use AI to talk to people. So if you want to know more, just go to our website. We're easy to find. You can always shoot me an email to get slides, etc. I'm going to switch the screen because maybe there's some questions here as well. Let me see if I can find that. Let's see. This is an interesting question here from Michael Bounce. So some of the cues that are good in conversation. So repeating, okay, you want to buy sneakers. How you make sure that these techniques work for everybody. Well, if you look at voice, so using implicit confirmations, people want to know that you've understood them. Otherwise, they just freak out and become insecure. So people are just wired that way, right? So there's some things that have been just researched to death in 20 years of what works for people and how the brain works. That's part of it. And then if you do Wizard of Oz test and actually have people interact with the design, you're going to figure out what does and doesn't work. And a lot of times when you have sample dialogue, where you do the role play, or you just have people through Wizard of Oz test interact with it, whenever they sort of fall silent, or when they're a bit insecure, or when they're just, they pause for 2 seconds before they answer, that is a cue that you have a design challenge and you need to find a solution for it. So you start with the bare minimum, and then through the interaction and playing around with it, you got to figure out what does and doesn't work and start applying these things. So just saying you need to apply these principles in these situations doesn't really work. There is some fundamental structures that always need to be applied, and then through the design process, you're going to figure out what needs to be added on top of that. That's a good question. Let's see. I think I'm officially out of time already. If there's anyone else that wants to shoot us a question here.